3, 2, 1. And we're live, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you to the production staff. Appreciate that. I see a little note on my screen that we're now streaming live on YouTube. So hello to all of our audience worldwide. And good afternoon, everyone. If you're on the East Coast, good morning and across the country. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for today's virtual meeting of the DNC Rules and Bylaws Committee. I'm Jim Roosevelt from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, where we now have 10 inches of snow falling, and it's falling at about 2 inches a minute, right? And at 10 inches of snow already fallen, and it's falling continually at about 2 inches a minute. So 2 inches an hour, rather, not a minute, but 2 inches an hour. So we're heading for 1.5 or 2 feet. I'm joined by my wonderful co-chair and good friend, Lorraine Miller, from the great state of Texas, where I'm pretty sure it's not snowing. We are co-chairs of the Rules and Bylaws Committee. This is the first meeting of the Rules and Bylaws Committee appointed by Chair Harrison last October. Over the coming months, we'll be spending a lot of time together at meetings. We know this from experience, but this time we'll be doing it either virtually or in person. Lorraine and I look forward to working with you on all of the business related to the DNC and the presidential nominating process that will come before this committee. Our meeting today is an official meeting of the committee and is being live streamed, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, on the DNC's YouTube channel, so that we will have an official record of our deliberations. To begin our meeting, please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, now I will turn it over to my esteemed co-chair, Lorraine Miller.
Thank you, Jim. And howdy, members. Howdy from the 70 degrees in Fort Worth, Texas. I'm Lorraine Miller, and I am pleased to serve with Jim as the co-chair of this committee. We need to make sure that we have a quorum at this meeting. To call the roll, I will now recognize our esteemed parliamentarian, Helen McFadden. Helen has been the DNC's parliamentarian for many a year and has always been available to answer any questions you may have. And Helen, will you please call the roll for us?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Applebaum, are you here?
I'm present, yes.
Ms. Blanco?
Presente.
Ms. Brazil?
President, cold New York City.
Ooh.
Mr. Brennan?
I am present, and I will apparently rename myself because someone renamed me Donna.
You're beautiful, baby.
Mr. Burgos?
Present on the Hudson, frozen.
Unlike the usual, I'm in New York too. Ms. Cardona? Ms. Cardona? Mr. Curry?
Present.
Ms. Daughtry?
Present.
Ms. Dowdell?
Present.
Mr. Elite?
Present.
Ms. Fowler?
I'm here, although I'm labeled as someone else. I'm really here.
I recognize your voice. Mr. Heredia?
Here.
Thank you. Ms. Kmark? Ms. Kmark?
Here.
Mr. Leon? Mr. Leon? He was on earlier. Ms. Lewis?
Here.
Mr. Locke?
Here.
Ms. Mcgarrett?
Here.
Mr. Martin?
Here.
Ms. Martinez?
Presente.
Mr. McDonald?
Here.
Mr. McGlinchey? Mr. McGlinchey? Mr. Mitchell?
Here.
Ms. Moore?
Present.
Ms. Mount? Mr. Ray?
Here.
Mr. Saunders?
Here.
Mr. Spate?
Present.
Mr. Thompson? Mr. Thompson? Ms. Weingarten?
I'm here.
Ms. Williams?
Here.
And let me go back and ask Mr. Leon. I think he's here. I'm going to, yeah. And Mr. McGlinchey, I think he's here. I didn't. Okay. You certainly have more than a quorum, Madam Chairperson. A quorum is 13 right now.
Great. Thank you, Helen. And we do have a quorum, which is super. As a reminder, members, a quorum is constituted by 40%. That means 13 of the members present in person or by proxy. The party bylaws contain an attendance requirement. Members who miss 3 consecutive Rules and Bylaws Committee meetings are deemed to have resigned from the committee. Registering your proxy, while important in establishing a quorum and assuring your vote is represented, the proxy does not count for the purpose of attending a meeting. For today's Zoom meeting, please keep in mind that members will be muted unless they are recognized to speak, at which point they will be introduced and unmuted by the staff. If a member of the committee would like to be recognized, please use the raise hand feature or send a chat to Jenna Whitaker. When you raise your hand or send a chat, Jenna will create a queue that we will use to call on each member. It's a little different when we're in person. We can point right at you and recognize you, but here we have to get a queue. When it's your turn to speak, you will be announced and unmuted. We will do our darndest to call on everyone in the order you seek recognition, so please be patient with us. Now, as we get underway for today's Rules and Bylaws Committee meeting and the work ahead of this committee, which is a lot, we are joined today by a very special guest. He's a lifelong Democrat who is always fighting for a better, fairer, and brighter future for every American. As the DNC chair, as you kind of assume it would be, he is a driving force in the success of our party, and it's continually working to build the next generation of Democratic talent. We are honored to have our DNC chair, Jamie Harrison, with us today. Mr. Chair, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I really appreciate it. It's so good seeing you, Ms. Lorraine. Jim, so good seeing you as well. Thank you all for shepherding this committee. Thank you for your leadership. I remember when I first became chair, and the thought was, well, what happens in terms of the leaderships of the various committees? And when I thought about the Rules and Bylaws Committee, and I thought about the work that needed to happen as we go into the 2024 race, I knew that one of my top priorities was to get Jim and Lorraine to remain as chairs and co-chairs of this committee. So thank you both for all that you have done for this party and what you continue to do. And hello, folks. I want to welcome you all to our first Rules and Bylaws Committee of the year. To our returning members, it is so good to have you back, and I am so grateful and thankful for all of the good work that you did to help us prepare for last year's, the 2020 election season. And I am looking forward to working with you all as we prepare for the 2024 election season. And for those of you who are new to the committee, we're also very excited to work with you. So welcome to, some of you are even new to the DNC. So welcome to the DNC, welcome to the Rules and Bylaws Committee. The work that you do is so important to the mission and what we do at the DNC. So today's meeting is just, another step, another important step to put the Democratic Party in the strongest possible position headed into our midterms in 2022, this year, and 2024 and beyond. Just last week, we marked 1 year of the Biden-Harris administration. President Biden and Vice President Harris took office in the face of several crises. They promised to deliver real results for everyday people. And, they have done just that. Today, over 200 million Americans are fully vaccinated and 95% of schools are open. The economy has created a record number of jobs. And just the other day, we found out that 2021 was the best year for economic growth in nearly 40 years. On top of that, we've secured a huge victory for working families and communities through the bipartisan infrastructure law. For years, people have been asking their leaders to address basic everyday needs. We just saw recently the bridge collapse in Pennsylvania. Things like access to clean water and affordable internet and action to address pollution and climate change. That's what people needed, and that's what they wanted. Some folks have just been asking for jobs. And for those of you who were familiar with my campaign, you know that some people just want their damn dirt roads paved. But for years, elected officials have talked a whole lot about those things. We've had a hell of a lot of infrastructure weeks with not a lot to show for it. But President Biden got it done. And he got it done with bipartisan support. Now we are well on our way to ripping up lead water pipes so that families know that the water coming out of their tap is safe. We're expanding internet access so that kids don't have to do homework in McDonald's parking lots. We're cleaning up Superfund sites and electrifying school buses to fight pollution in low-income communities. And yes, we're putting folks to work, paving dirt roads, repairing bridges, modernizing public transit, and so much more. Our work will change lives. And I'm speaking from experience. Democratic policies helped me to get to where I am today. What we accomplish in 2021 will make all of the difference to people all across the country. So my friends, there's still a whole lot to accomplish. That's where we all come in. Our job is to put President Biden and the Democratic Party in a position to deliver for Americans for years to come. Because Republicans have no agenda. Folks keep asking them what they're for, but for some reason they're drawing a blank. Maybe it's because they're too focused on the past to spend any time thinking about everyday folks and what they can do for them and for our future. Or maybe it's because they know that their policies giving handouts to their rich friends are unpopular with the American people. Regardless, the GOP has made it clear that they're not interested in government. So it's up to us. It's sad to see, but the Republican Party has become a party built on fraud, a party built on fear, a party that is now anchored in fascism. We have to communicate to the American people that Democrats are focused on addressing their everyday needs. We got to make sure folks know that Democrats deliver. So from now until election day 2022, the DNC is going to do exactly that. We're engaging grassroots supporters at levels that we've never seen, and we made historic investments earlier than we've ever done before. We built our largest voter protection team ever. And we're training organizers and putting folks on the ground in battleground states across the country. In 2022, we're turning up the heat and doubling down on our 57 state and territory strategy. We're going to continue recruiting candidates for every office, working closely with our state and local parties and our sister committees. And of course, we have to get the message out. Folks are going to know that Republicans are all talk. They're going to hear about the elected officials who are touting funding in the American Rescue Plan and the bipartisan infrastructure law, even though they were against those bills in the first place. I often say that I've wondered what happened to those kids that we were in high school with, the ones that always wanted to copy our paper and never did their homework. Well, we now know they're Republican members of the House and the Senate, but we're not going to let them take the credit for the work that we did. We're also going to make sure people know that Democrats get results and that if we want public servants who continue to deliver, then they should stick with us. Because if folks are looking for leaders who put democracy and the rule of law first, if they're looking for leaders who keep promises and do what they say, if they want leaders who will continue to deliver for their communities, then they're looking for a Democrat. So I want to thank you all again for being here today, and I look forward to the meeting ahead. Lorraine, Jim, thank you again for all that you do in shepherding of this great and very important committee.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a pleasure to work with you. Do you have a few minutes to take some questions from our members?
Of course, Madam Chair. Happy to do so.
Okay, great. Members, if you have a question for the chair, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom and we'll do our best to call on everyone in order. So let's not give a statement, let's ask the question so we can get to as many people that have questions for Chairman Harrison. So Jenna, do we have anybody seeking to ask the question?
Madam Chair, I do not see any questions at this time.
Oh, great. Mr. Chair, you get off light today.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I really appreciate it. And again, thank you all for all that you do for the party and the work that you have ahead in this committee. There's a lot of important work that has to get done as we prepare for the midterms and for 2024. And I feel I can rest assured knowing that the folks that are on this committee will get it done. So thank you all again.
Thank you, Chairman Harrison. Appreciate you.
Appreciate you.
Okay. Members, as Jim noted at the start of our meeting, this is our first rules and bylaws meeting since the chair appointed us in last October. Because we are going to be spending a whole lot of time working together in the coming months/year, why don't we take a few minutes to briefly introduce ourselves? Normally, when we're in a in-person meeting, we'd go around the table and do the introductions. But since we're doing this virtually, I'm going to recognize each member in alphabetical order. And when you're called on, please take a minute to tell us who you are, where you're from, and a little bit about yourself, okay? Stu, you're first. Stuart Applebaum.
Lorraine, I have to tell you, it's really good to see everybody again, even if we're meeting virtually. I'm Stuart Applebaum. I'm the president of the Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union, which is the union that is organizing the Amazon workers in Bessemer, Alabama. I'm also the executive vice president of the United Food and Commercial Workers, and I'm a DNC member from the state of New York.
Thank you, Stuart. Artie Blanco.
Good morning. It's still morning out west. So Artie Blanco, born and raised Houston, Texas. I am a member of the CWA, and I work for the largest federated body of unions in the country. I am based in Las Vegas, Nevada, and have been representing Nevada on the RBC for a while. So that's a little bit about myself.
Great, thank you, Artie. Donna Brazil, our former chair.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair and members of the committee. It's so good to see so many of you. I'm Donna Brazil, an at-large member of the Democratic National Committee, a grassroots organizer. I've been involved in Democratic Party politics since the age of 9, and I just turned 13. So thank God for the food I eat. I'm a member of SEIU Local 500 as an adjunct professor at Georgetown University now for 20 years. I'm also a member of SAG-AFTRA. You can view all of my movies and credits and give me some royalties. I would appreciate it. I've been interim chair of the DNC, a former vice chair for civic engagement and voter protection. But my most important role I've ever played at the DNC is being an intern for one of the colored girls, Mignon Moore.
Yeah. Thanks, Donna. Scott Brennan.
Hello, everybody. Good to see you again. Scott Brennan. I'm a lawyer in Des Moines, Iowa, born and raised in Iowa, two-time former state party chair, and had the pleasure of serving as state party chair when we elected Barack Obama in 2008. And party chair a second time. I've been on the RBC for kind of like Artie a while. In any event, I'd be looking forward to working with you all again, and we have a lot to do.
Okay. Tony Burgos, where are you, Tony?
I'm right here.
There you go.
Antonio Burgos, formerly from New York, formerly a DNC member from New York, and since 1998, a DNC member from the Garden State of New Jersey, member of the executive committee. And as I said before, speaking from the frozen Hudson, if you can see behind me, we're witnessing a whiteout. And that's not a racial term, that's a climate term. So I just want to say how proud I am to be on this committee and the long history that you and Jim have taken us through under difficult circumstances. So again, thank you, and let's get going.
Thank you, Tony. Maria Cardona. Presente. Maria?
She was not with us earlier.
Okay. Mr. Curry, Ray Curry. Mr. Curry? We'll come back to Mr. Curry because I saw him on there. We'll go to Leah Daughtry. Reverend Dr. Leah Daughtry.
Good morning, colleagues. Good morning. I'm Leah Daughtry, born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, and I am an at-large DNC member from the state of New York. I am also former chief of staff at the DNC, having served Terry McAuliffe and Howard Dean. They're two ends of a spectrum for you, and personality-wise. And former CEO of the 2008 and 2016 Democratic conventions. I run a consulting firm that focuses on organizational management and political strategy. Glad to be here for yet another term. Thankful for the leadership of Jim and Lorraine.
Thank you, Ms. Leah. Joanne Dowell.
Dowdell. Good morning. Good afternoon,
yes, there
everyone.
you are. Okay.
Hi, everyone. I'm Joanne Dowdell. I have been an at-large member of the DNC since 2008. I formerly served on the Resolutions Committee, and I am delighted to be joining all of you on the Rules and Bylaws Committee. I am currently located in Washington, D.C., and I'm holding the mantle down for New Hampshire. I'm on the board of Bay Atlantic University and Green America, and my day job is to work in the government relations office of News Corporation in our Washington, D.C. location.
Great, welcome to the committee.
Thank you.
Mo, where are you? There you are.
Hello. Hi, everyone. I am Mo Alathi. I am a new at-large member of the DNC and the new member of the RBC. Not new to the DNC, though. It's nice to see so many familiar faces back from my days as communications director for the committee and from many, many years out on the campaign trail, intersecting with many of you. Here in DC, I left the campaign lifestyle a few years ago. I'm now in academia, trying to learn as much as I can from Donna in this capacity as I have throughout my political career. But I'm excited to be here with all of you.
Great, thanks, Mo. Carol Fowler is returning to our committee from South Carolina. Hi, Carol. You unmute yourself.
Oh, sorry. I am happy to be back on the RVC. I was a member of the Rules and Bylaws Committee from 1993 until 2011, serving a little bit of that time as one of the co-chairs. I've been on the DNC a long time. I was vice chair of the South Carolina Democratic Party for 20 years. And after that, I served 8 years as chair of the state party. I am now a member of the DNC elected from South Carolina. I also had 2 years as a member of, from 95 to 97, as a member of the DNC staff, which was a fun job. I wouldn't want to do it again, but it was a fun job. So I'm pleased to be with all of you again.
Great, thank you, Carol. Welcome back. Luis Erdina? There you are.
Heredia. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. My name is Luis Heredia. I was born and raised in Somerton, Arizona, right 3 miles away from the US-Mexico border. I've been living in Arizona my entire life. I've worked on a number of different campaigns. This is my 3rd term as a DNC member. I had the privilege of serving on the DNC Credentials Committee for my previous 2 terms, and I am very grateful to be serving with you all on this very important task. I was the executive director of the Arizona Democratic Party from 2009 to 2012 and learned why we all need to do what we must do is for our party. My day job, I serve as the state director for U.S. Senator Mark Kelly.
Oh, great. Welcome. Pronounce your last name again.
Heredia. E is silent.
Okay, all right.
So appreciate it.
Great, welcome. Elaine Kmart, longtime member of this committee. Where are you, Elaine? There you are. Unmute yourself.
I just did.
Yeah, okay.
Hi, everybody. I'm Elaine Kmark. I've been on this committee since 1997. I first worked at the DNC in even earlier than that I'm sorry, I've been on the committee more recently than that, but I came to work at the DNC years ago when Jimmy Carter was president, and I worked on the Compliance Review Commission, which was sort of a precursor to the Rules and Bylaws Committee. I come here in a weird way. When Jimmy Carter lost to Ronald Reagan, for those of us who were young and wanted to work in politics, there weren't any jobs because we lost the Senate too, as some of you will remember. So I decided maybe it was time to finish my doctoral dissertation, and I wrote a dissertation about the party's nomination process. And then in 2009, many years later, having worked in politics and worked in academia, I turned that into a book called Primary Politics, Everything You Need to Know About How America Nominates Its Presidents. So it's now in its 3rd edition, and I am grateful to be still an at-large member of the DNC and still be able to help out and be part of the Rules and Bylaws Committee. And I hope to get to know all of you in the course of our upcoming year, which is going to be very intense, I promise.
Thanks, Elaine. Frank Leon.
Good afternoon. My name is Frank Leon. I served as vice chair for rules with the Virginia Democratic Party for a couple of terms. I represented Virginia on the DNC for 3 terms, and I served 2 terms on Credentials Committee and last year on Rules and Bylaws. I didn't seek re-election. I moved to our nation's capital. And so now I'm in DC, and I'm very grateful to be an at-large member and to be back on the committee. When I'm not doing rule stuff, I do voter protection and election protection work, and that's certainly more important than ever. So I'm really happy to be back again with this group and looking forward to working with everybody.
Thank you, Frank, and we're glad to have you back. Our Maryland State Party Chair, the incomparable Yvette Lewis. Where are you, Yvette?
I'm right here. Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. Hi, everybody. I'm Yvette Lewis. I am the chair of the Maryland Democratic Party. This is my second iteration as chair. I was chair from 2011 until 2015, and then I came back in 2019 to finish out the term of the prior chair. We'll discuss my sanity at a different time as to why I came back to do this. But I am chair of the party. One of the greatest titles that I'm holding right now, though, thanks to ASDC President Ken Martin, I am the chair of the Voter Protection Standing Committee for the ASDC and working very closely with the DNC. This is the first time that I feel like we really have a cohesive, seamless relationship, and we really are going to be able to get some things done. People are finally realizing that we are under threat, and it's more important than ever to protect the vote. I was a national committee woman for Maryland during the time that I wasn't chair of the party. Prior to that, my life makes no sense because I'm a former teacher and a former professional opera singer. But you know what they say, the whole world is a stage. So I guess I fit in right here. So that's me.
Great. Thanks, Yvette. We have part of a new member of our committee, an illustrious elected, Gary Locke.
Hi.
There you are. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm a new member, former governor of the state of Washington, the first Asian American governor elected to the mainland, Democrat or Republican. That was 1997 to 2005. And then I served in the Obama administration as U.S. Secretary of Commerce and then U.S. Ambassador to China. Right now, I am the interim president at Bellevue College, which is the 3rd largest higher education institution in the state of Washington, and really pleased to be part of the committee.
Governor, we're glad to have you. You bring a lot of experience to it. Thank you for being part of our committee. Okay, our next one is Molly Mcgarrett.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Yes, thank you. So really excited to join everyone. I've previously participated in DNC meetings as a staffer. I was the former executive director of the Delaware Democratic Party, and then briefly a DNC staffer in the political office or political department in 2009 before coming back to Delaware to work on campaigns. In my day job, I work in health policy and social service delivery. So it's been a really fun 2 years. In the pandemic. And so this is a nice respite from pandemic discussion. And again, it's my honor to be on the committee and look forward to working with everyone.
Great, Molly, glad to have you. Ken Martin. Ken, are you on?
I am, thank you.
He's our main guy. No, you are. You're kind of manage all of our state and territories, and it's like, I like to say like herding cows, but you herd cats.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman Miller. My name's Ken Martin. I'm from Minnesota. I am a vice chair of the Democratic National Committee, president of the Association of State Democratic Committees, and most importantly, the longtime chair of the Minnesota Democratic Farmer Labor Party. I think outside of Ray Buckley, I am the 2nd longest serving state party chair. And as Yvette said, we'll talk about our sanity later. But look, my role here, I've been proud to serve on the Rules and Bylaws Committee for the last 4.5 years, representing all of our 57 state parties. So thank you all. Welcome to all the new members. We look forward to serving with you.
Great. Good seeing you, Ken. Iris Martinez. Where are you? There you are.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. I come from the great state that gave you the best president of the United States, Barack Obama, and also I'm a former colleague of his because I did serve with him in the General Assembly here in the state of Illinois. I am the former state senator, now the current new clerk of the circuit court for Illinois, and it is for Cook County, and it is the second largest unified system in the nation. So you can imagine it's a great job. It's been wonderful, and right now taking care of those individuals coming into our court system. I am the current chair of the Hispanic Caucus for the DNC. I've been part of the DNC for over 30 years. I say that, but I started at the age of 10, so I'm still very young, still got 50 more years to go. But I just want to say welcome to all the new members that have joined the DNC, and especially the rules and bylaws. Excited to work, looking forward to working under the great chairmanship of Jamie Harrison. And again, welcome to everyone, and thank you so much. I am so proud to be part of this team.
Thank you, Iris. So let's go back to, I think Maria Cardona is on. Maria, where are you?
I am here. Thank you so much. And I apologize for being late. I had technical difficulties, but all resolved now. All resolved. I am so proud to be serving on the rules and bylaws. I feel like the DNC is my home. It's like Hotel California for me. You can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave. I started right out of school. My very first entree into politics was working for Chairman Ron Brown. And, it has been a whirlwind ever since. And then I went back to serve under Terry McAuliffe with Mignon. And it was also a fabulous experience. And I'm so proud to still be connected to this amazing institution. And especially because, many of you have already said this, but it could not be truer. We are at a crossroads in our country at a time where we thought the election of Joe Biden was going to be sort of, the saving grace. And I think it has really not through any fault of his own, but through many of the heinous acts that the other side has been committing. We are in a more difficult position than ever before. And it is incumbent upon institutions like ours to make sure that our democracy continues to hold in these times of peril. So I feel like a warrior with all of you. We're in the trenches, and I couldn't be prouder of serving with all of you at my side. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Maria. Mr. Curry, Ray Curry, are you with us?
Yes, good afternoon, Madam Chair. Ray Curry, new at-large member. Yep, new at-large member, new to the Rules and Bylaws Committee, originally from Charlotte, North Carolina, currently residing in Michigan for the last 3 years. And I currently serve as the president of United Auto Workers International Union.
Yeah, great. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you.
All right, surely. If you want to know something about the rules of this committee, you ask David McDonald. David, where are you? There you go.
Thank you, Lorraine. I'm David McDonald. I represent the state of Washington. I've been elected by that state party since 1992 to the National Committee. I've served on this committee since 2001. I was a legislative district chair in the party for 4 years, a county chair for King County, which is about a third of the state of Washington, for 8 years, served as the election contest manager and recount manager for the 2004 governor's election in Washington, which was probably the largest manual recount of an election in history, eventually decided by 133 votes after 6 months of litigation and I think a 3 or 4 month recount. I have a lovely wife who was very tolerant when I left for what should have been a 1 week leave of absence without pay and turned out to be 8 months. This is just a very exciting committee, as many others have said. I think this particular cycle, one of our most unique challenges will be we have to absorb all the changes that will be wrought by COVID and the pandemic into a process that has historically only had to worry about traditional issues of security. Now we have health security and the balance of hybrid meetings, virtual meetings, in-person meetings. and so on. So I'm glad to be back. This is a great place to be. Thanks.
Great. Glad to have you, David, with us. Brian?
McGlinchey.
Yeah, there
You got it, Madam Chair. Thank you very much. Well, you had mentioned David being the most informed member of the committee. I'm the new guy, so I'm probably the least informed. So he's a tough act to follow. But I joined Molly Mcgarrett, who you met earlier, being from the great state of Delaware, the president's home state. I had the good fortune of working for then Senator Biden on his senior staff. I have years of experience working for a Democratic caucus, previous life in Dover in the Senate majority, as well as our first African-American mayor, Jim Sills, in the city of Wilmington. I'm a senior advisor with McCarter in English in the government affairs practice, and I very much look forward to learning, listening, and meeting each and every one of you. So thank you very, very much for having us, and we
Welcome,
look forward
Brian.
to a productive relationship.
Okay, welcome. All right, Mahan Mitchell? There you are. Hi, brother.
How are you?
We're good.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Malin Mitchell. I come from the great state of Wisconsin, home of the championship Milwaukee Bucks. I have been a firefighter now for 25 years. I work in the city of Madison. I'm a lieutenant downtown at our downtown station, Station 1. I also serve as the president of the Professional Firefighters Wisconsin under the International Association of Firefighters. Here in Wisconsin, I represent about 4,000 members, about 60 locals across our great state. Some of you may remember, or we try to forget here in Wisconsin, but Governor Scott Walker was elected in 2011. I actually started and came in office as a state president for the Firefighters Union 3 days after he was put in office. And 10 days later, he came out with this collective bargaining law that stripped collective bargaining from teachers, janitors, basically every union, except for firefighters and police officers. We had a choice to make at that time, and we stood up and stood out with our brothers and sisters in AFL-CIO, as well as every other major union here in the state, and we marched against that law even though we were exempt, and we continue to stand with our brothers and sisters in labor. I'm happy to be here. I also serve as my local president right here in Madison, Firefighters Local 311, and I'm an at-large member. I think this is my second go-around as an at-large member. First time on the Rules and Bylaws Committee, though. So thanks for having me. Look forward to meeting all of you.
Great, good to have you. I'm Lorraine Miller, and I worked on the Hill for a number of years. All right, Mignon Moore. Hey, Ming.
Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mignon Moore. I hail from the great state and city of Chicago, Illinois, with our famous leader, Iris, and our former president, Barack Obama. I have served 2 tours of duty at the DNC. I had the pleasure of serving under the late, great Don Fowler, who appointed me, he and Senator Dodd, as the first African-American to serve as the political director. From there, I credit Don Fowler for actually opening up the doors for me to work in the White House. I served under President Clinton in 2 positions as assistant to the president for Director of Political Affairs and Director of Office of Public Liaison. I left the White House at the end of that tenure and came back to the DNC and served as the CEO under Terry McAuliffe with Leah Daltrey and many others, Maria Cardona, and many others on this call. And I had the pleasure of having Donna Brazile, as she has mentioned, as my intern after she had won the election of Al Gore. She came back and humbly served again. So I'd say that to end with, public service is a noble calling that I will always, always try to do when asked to serve. And when Jamie, Jim, and Lorraine called, I said I would be honored to come back to the Rules and Bylaws Committee. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Ming. We have to have you. Judy is not with us today, Judy Mount. Now we'll go to our esteemed Secretary, Jason Ray.
Well, thank you, Madam Co-Chair. It is great to be with all of you today. Jason Ray hailing, much like Malin, from the great state of Wisconsin. I live in Milwaukee, the home of the 2021 NBA champions, as he mentioned. I'm honored to serve as the secretary for the Democratic National Committee. I've served in this role since being elected in 2017. I was reelected in 2021. Prior to that, I've served as a committee member from Wisconsin, first elected in 2004 when I was 17 and reelected in 2008, 2012, and 2016. So I'm honored to be here and honored to get to continue working with all of you again as we move forward toward 2024 and beyond. Thank you, Madam Co-Chair.
Sure. And members, you'll find Jason delightful to work with. Jim Roosevelt, tell us who you are.
Thanks, Lorraine. I'm not going to be quite as brief as you were, and since you didn't even mention that you were clerk of the House of Representatives.
I worked on the Hill.
Yeah, right. I am a member of SAG-AFTRA, and the votes are coming up for the SAG Awards, so feel free to let me know who your favorite actors and technical folks are. But I live in Cambridge, Massachusetts, right across the river from Boston, even though I grew up in California. In Massachusetts, in my city, we've just reelected our mayor, who is a Pakistani American. Across the river in Boston, we've just elected the first Asian American and the first woman mayor of Boston. But what we're about this year is electing a Democratic governor, which we have not had for 8 years in Massachusetts. And the deadline for people to declare their candidacies for our state convention was yesterday, and all 3 candidates for governor are women. So we are looking forward to a great future. They're all very strong, a Harvard professor, a state senator, and our wonderful attorney general, Maura Healey, are running for governor. So we have a great future ahead of us that I'm working hard on the local level, but it's great to continue to work with all of you at the DNC.
Thanks, Jim. One of our great labor leaders, Lee Saunders. Lee, where are you? There you are.
I am here. I'm Lee Saunders. I am an at-large member from Washington, D.C. I am the president of the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, AFSCME for short, representing 1.4 everyday heroes who provide public services to all of you and to this country. I want to recognize my good sister and my friend and my partner, and that's Donna Brazil. When she said she was 14 years old, that makes me still in diapers, but I'm improving on that. Okay, I'm going to be okay with that. But it's good to see everybody. I see you, Donna. I see you. It's good to see everybody, and look forward to moving this country forward.
Greatly. Glad to have you back on the committee. Another great Texan, Dennis Spate. Dennis, where are you? There you are.
Madam Co-Chair, love to serve with you on this committee as a fellow Texan. This will be my second tour of duty on the RBC, my 3rd term. I was the president of the Texas Young Democrats many years ago and the vice chair for finance, which made me the state finance chair for our state party. And in my pay job, I am the political director for the Texas Trial Lawyers Association. Looking forward to it.
Okay, thanks, Dennis. Kenny Thompson. Kenny, where are you? Oh, Kenny. Okay. We'll come back to Kenny and move to another outstanding labor leader, Randy Weingarten. Hi, Randy.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you. Can you hear me now? Am I unmuted now?
Yes.
This is like the one thing that we will always say or hate saying post-COVID. Will you unmute yourself or will you mute yourself? So first, I want to say thank you to the leadership of this committee for all the newcomers. This is the people that are on here. I have learned so much from many of them, including the chairs and including many who have been honored already. So thank you for all of your service in all of the zigzags and all of the challenges that we've had over all these years, Penny, my dog, is thanking you as well. My name is Randy Weingarten. For those who don't know me, you have seen me bashed and trashed a lot on Fox because I have the temerity of believing that we need to teach honest history, including about the Holocaust and slavery in our history. But I also believe that we have to keep schools open in a safe way, and we have to deal with all of these challenges. And that's what Democrats do. I'm the president of the AFT, the American Federation of Teachers. We represent 1.7 million people. The through line there is everybody makes a difference in the lives of everybody, of other people, from nurses and respiratory therapists to teachers, from pre-K to higher education. And we join with Lee in representing many of the public servants in this country. And I am on leave from my position as a social studies teacher in Brooklyn, New York, at Clara Barton High School for the health professions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Randy. And Tanya Williams, who is one of our newest members. Tanya? There you are.
Thank you. Hi, how are you? So glad to be here today and so glad to be on the committee. I'm Tanya Williams, a new at-large member, and I come from North Carolina, originally from North Carolina, where I worked, got my start in politics actually, working for the state legislature there. Moved on to DC, actually where I live now. I came to DC where I was chief of staff for Congressman Butterfield, GK Butterfield. And couldn't get enough and eventually became the legislative director for Joe Biden, our now president. So very excited. These days you can find me working venture capital, working on capital access for underrepresented founders. So excited to be here, excited to be with this amazing group of people and fighters. So glad to be in the fight, in the trenches with you.
Great. Welcome, Tanya. Guys, this ends our member introduction. This has been really great. And this is, I think Jim and I are humbled to serve with such an august grouping of Democrats and Americans who want to move our party forward. It's obvious that we have a lot of talented and committed Democrats on this committee, and so we got lots to do. I want to take just a second to acknowledge the team. This is the heart of what we do and the workers behind. We may come up with policy and we may come up with rules and all this, but all this gets done and kind of instituted by our team. They have been working throughout this process and they work tirelessly to make sure our meetings run smoothly, but that the work gets done. You've already met our fabulous parliamentarian, Helen McFadden. In addition to we have our staff of the Office of Party Affairs and Delegate Selection. Rob Engel is our new PADS director. Rob took over from, what's her name?
Patrice?
Yes. Out of sight, out of mind, huh? Please forgive me. And then we have our office assistant, Jenna Whitaker. Where's Jenna? Jenna is really controlling the mechanics of our meeting, so she's another integral part. And of course, our PADS advisor, Rick Broylan. I want to say a special shout out to Rick. Rick has been, when Patrice was here, he was with us as an advisor, but he has stepped in to really assist Rob as he's getting his sea legs and all of that. And Rick, we really do appreciate you because he has all this institutional memory. And I want to thank our interns, Emma Pickering, Spencer Jones, Zoe Rogers. These guys have really pitched in and are excited about the work they're going to be doing. We also appreciate the help from our great DNC council. Graham Wilson and Andy Levin are the best. And for today's meeting, we are joined by the DNC Executive Director, Sam Carnelli, and the boss, DNC Senior Advisor, Mary Beth Cahill. And running our Zoom meeting today is Charlie Espino. He is the DNC Operations Manager. Thanks to everyone for their work. And if you have any questions about the work of the DNC Rules and Bylaws Committee, please don't hesitate to contact our amazing staff. With that, Jim, I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, thank you, Lorraine. And it's great to hear a little bit about everybody. We look forward to the time when we can get together in person and get to know each other even better. That's what I miss about these doing these Zoom meetings, and looking forward to that. At our meeting last October, the Rules and Bylaws Committee considered 5 proposed amendments to the Charter and Bylaws. 2 of those proposed amendments were postponed by this committee to our next committee meeting, which is today. One of those amendments was to update the name of the Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, and Transgender American Caucus. When the amendment was submitted, it was expected that the LGBT caucus would meet prior to the RBC meeting and approve the amendments to their bylaws to change their caucus name. When the DNC meeting schedule was modified due to COVID considerations, the meeting of that caucus was postponed until later. As such, the RBC postponed its consideration of this amendment to our next meeting, which presumably would take place after the caucus met. We now expect that the caucus will meet prior to our meeting in March. So we need to postpone this amendment again so that meeting can take place. Is there any objection to postponing consideration of this proposed amendment until our next RBC meeting, where we will consider other DNC related business? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. This amendment will be postponed to the March meeting. Also at our October meeting, we considered an amendment proposed to clarify the role of the Resolutions Committee. During the committee's deliberations, members had some questions and asked us for the language of the proposed amendment to be asked to have that language clarified. The amendment was postponed until our next meeting, which is today. Is there any objection to again postponing consideration of this proposed amendment to our next RBC meeting, where we will consider other DNC related matters? Hearing none, that is so ordered. And I will turn it back to you, Lorraine. Lorraine, you are muted. And now you are unmuted.
Okay. Guys, when we notified you about this meeting, we said that our purpose today is to begin the process of working on the rules for the 2024 presidential nominating process. We won't be drafting any rules. Instead, this is our first opportunity to talk about some of the key issues where we may want to focus our discussion at subsequent meetings. Our committee is responsible for drafting the delegate selection rules and the call for the convention for the 2024 cycle. We will meet again in March during the DNC meetings and then host several other meetings to work through the rules and the call to finalize the proposed documents, the rules and the call to be presented for consideration at the DNC's next meeting this summer. A lot of work. At our upcoming meetings, we will go through the documents section by section, and in some cases, line by line or word by word. So it's important. You've received all these documents from the PAD staff, and if you could familiarize yourself with them, that would be helpful in making our meeting run a little more expeditiously. But for today's meeting, we're taking a big picture approach. We'll take a few minutes to talk about what our party's goals are with the presidential nominating process. This is very important. Then we will briefly recap some of the rules changes made in 2020 as a result of the Unity Reform Commission's recommendations. This is foundational stuff that we hope to get done today. After that, we will open the floor for discussion for members for comments and questions about the rules. Jim?
Thank you, Lorraine. As we begin thinking about the rules that will govern our presidential nominating process in 2024, Lorraine and I thought it would be good to take a couple of minutes to remind us about why we have these rules. What are we trying to achieve? How do our rules reflect our party's values? The rules that govern our nominating process are based on rules originally developed for the 1972 nominating process by the McGovern-Fraser Commission. Over the years, we've fine-tuned our rules in areas that need improvement and changed policies to better reflect the values of our party. I should mention that staff is arranging for each RBC member to receive a copy of the latest edition of Elaine Kmark's book called Primary Politics. That book gives you a very full and helpful understanding about the evolution of our rules. But generally speaking today, first of all, our rules ensure that we have transparency, that our process is open, and that our rules and procedures are clear for voters who wish to participate as Democrats. Next, they require us to actively take steps to reach out to and specifically include our Democratic constituencies in our process. Then they call for our party to examine ways to expand opportunities for Democrats to register, to vote, and to be part of our nominating process. Next, our rules ensure that we have a level playing field. They encourage party building, including empowerment of rank and file Democrats. And they are designed to strengthen and unify the Democratic Party in the lead up to the general election to ensure competitiveness in the general election. What I'd like to do now is ask Mignon Moore to offer her thoughts about the goals of our nominating process. As you've heard, Mignon is a former political director and CEO of the DNC, and she served as the assistant to the president and director of White House political affairs under President Clinton while I was serving as associate commissioner of Social Security. Mignon?
Thank you, Jim. And welcome to all the new members. For us, it's important for us all to remember that ensuring our nomination process reflects the values of the party. And as Jim has mentioned, that means transparency, inclusiveness, and access to the ballot. It also means that we have to have a process that we have faith in, that gives a voice to our voters, and it puts us in the best position to win in the general election. These have always been the important values of the party, but perhaps more than ever, we as a party have to carry the torch of a healthy democracy and demonstrate our commitment to conducting free, fair, and transparent elections. As we watch, and as we have watched, the Republicans continue their assault on voting rights. This is one of our opportunities to show our voters and those who would join the party that we not only walk the walk, but we are committed to expanding and protecting the right to vote and making sure that our electoral process is inclusive and equitable. And those are the values that I stand by with this party. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Mignon. Very helpful background for us as we begin the work ahead of us. After each presidential election, so now I'm going to actually turn it over to Lorraine Miller for a recap of the 2020 reforms and the Unity Commission. And Lorraine, you are muted.
Okay. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Mignon. Your comments, Mignon, gives us a great overlay of our principles and our values. And those are the principles and values that we're want to implement as we make decisions, policy, rules, decisions, whatever, that should permeate our decision-making. So after each presidential cycle, this committee typically meets to review the elements of the last nominating process. We look at what worked well, and we identify areas where changes need to be made or improve the process going forward. For the 2020 process, much of our committee's examination of the rules was guided by the recommendations made by the Unity Reform Commission. That commission was a body that was established at the 2016 convention, Democratic National Convention in Philadelphia. As a result, the major reforms made to the rules for 2020 were in three key areas: primaries, caucuses, and automatic delegates. So the 2020 rules encouraged state parties to use government-run primaries. Our rules required states to ensure that their voting locations were accessible, that steps were taken to allow for same-day or automatic registration, and same-day party switching in the Democratic presidential nominating process. We encourage state parties to support efforts to protect and expand the vote, and to undertake education programs so that voters understood the rules and timelines for our nominating process. We required that caucus systems provide absentee voting and other mechanisms for voters who couldn't participate in person. We also required that state parties demonstrate that they had technical and financial ability to run a caucus. They had to provide for votes to be cast in writing and for the allocation of delegates to be based on the first level of voting. They also had to publicly report the statewide and district level results for each candidate. And we also reformed the role played in our nominating process by automatic delegates. At the 2020 convention, delegates adopted the Unity Resolution that calls for the Rules and Bylaws Committee to protect and continue the work started in 2017 to make improvements to the 2024 nominating process and the Democratic National Convention, and build on the successes achieved in the 2020 cycle. As part of that resolution, last year, the Rules and Bylaws Committee conducted a review of the nominating reforms made to the 2020 process. In May, the committee reviewed the reforms made to the rules concerning government-run primaries. In July, the committee looked at the reforms related to caucuses and automatic delegates. We heard from Democrats around the country and around the world, who shared their thoughts and ideas on the reforms through a survey posted on the DNC's website. With that kind of brief recap, I'd like to ask Lee Saunders to provide his perspective on the changes that were made to our 2020 rules. Lee?
Thanks, Lorraine. Let me just say, for those who were on the RBC previously, when we engaged in the discussions regarding the Unity Reform Commission's work, we had some very healthy dialogue and discussions. We had disagreements, but we were able to come to agreements on how we should move and moving the process forward. I want to emphasize the importance of the Unity Reform Commission's work on expanding ballot access. That's extremely important, and improving the process of our primary. And we did just that, all of us collectively. I think the commission made significant progress in these areas. We've still got work to do, but we made significant progress, with perhaps its most important reforms being those that reduced the prevalence of caucuses in our system. We've got to do more. We've got to do more. That change and others made by the commission put a marker down that this party stands for ballot access for all voters, and that it is a charge that we carry on the RBC as we begin our process. We'll be considering how to improve upon that process. As we look forward to the rest of this year and the work that we have in front of us, and it's very, very important work, I'm hopeful that we carry on the mantle of the commission and take a serious look, a real serious look at what we need to do to improve and change the processes that exist to provide more democracy, to provide more access within our party. Thank you, Lorraine.
Thanks, Lee. Very good, very good. I think it would also be helpful for members to hear from David McDonald about his experience in Washington State, where they changed from a caucus system to a state-run primary. David, can you give our members a brief synopsis of what you experienced in Washington?
Sure, Lorraine, thank you. Let me just say preliminarily that I'm very experienced with caucuses. I think, as I mentioned earlier, I was a legislative district chair and a county chair. I probably directly ran or supervised something like 15,000 caucuses during my tenure as a chair, then advising the state party on probably another 150,000 across 40 years. So some of my observations about the change are based on that experience. There are, as I'm sure you will hear, many benefits to a well-run caucus, and I won't go into those, but they come at a cost. There's a heavy resource drain on the party. There are many obstacles to voting in a caucus that we would not tolerate in a primary, won't tolerate in a general election, but that our Republican counterparts would love to impose on us in many states. And there's an increased risk of distracting arguments. So the Unity Reform Commission urged the RBC to make changes, which we did. Again, I won't go into them. Some of them were just mentioned, but they involved increased access to voting, maintaining records sufficient to have a recount, and elimination of tiers so that everybody would know what the outcome was the day of the election. In Washington State, this gave us an opportunity to finally reach agreement with our state legislature to give us a primary that met DNC rules, which would then give the party an option to choose between the caucus and the primary. And given that over the years, we had improved our caucus process in Washington to such an extent that it was no longer meeting in homes. It was meeting in collective caucuses in gymnasiums. It had some limited form of absentee voting. It had increased attendance, and it looked, for all intents and purposes, as if it was a firehouse primary. It just didn't have adequate resources and many of the safeguards. So we elected to go with a primary. Now, when I look back, say a precinct caucus, the precinct caucuses in 1980 in Washington, which was a very contested year. And I can tell you that in my home precinct, it was definitely worked because I did the work. 4 people showed up at my house. 2 of them were my wife and I. We spent a lot of time improving that process. And by 2004, I think we had attendance up from what was about 1% of registered voters in 1980 to maybe 2 or 3% by 2004 when we were trying to get rid of Bush. We continued to improve it, and by 2016, the highest caucus attendance that I think we ever had in the state of Washington. As I'm sure everybody will remember, by March of that year, a very contested scenario. We got turnout up to maybe 5% of registered voters in the state of Washington. Last year in 2020, we changed to using the primary that we had worked out with the state government. And our attendance and participation in the Democratic side of that primary was about 34% of registered voters. Translating that into numbers, probably 1.3 million more Democrats participated in that process than had previously participated. And in the process also let us know that they existed so that we could work with them to build a stronger party. And then finally, I just want to say, one of the hidden risks of the caucus system, we dodged very narrowly. Washington's precinct caucuses traditionally around the second Tuesday in March. That's when our presidential primary was. You may recall that about 2 weeks before the second Tuesday in March, the first death from COVID was recorded in the state of Washington. And we were pretty close to lockdown by 2 days before the primary, trying to run a precinct caucus system 10 days after that event in the middle of the lockdown would have been terrible. There are probably still some reforms that need to be made to caucus systems where they are used. And I hope that we'll look at those seriously because, as I said, it's easy to see the benefits of a well-run caucus, but we really pay a price for it in the overall process. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. Very helpful background for all of us. What we'd like to do now is open discussion to members for your questions and comments about aspects of our nominating process that you think we should plan to discuss in depth at our future RBC meetings. We've scheduled 45 minutes for this discussion, and we want to hear from as many of you as possible. As a reminder, if you want to speak, please use the raise hand feature or send a chat message to Jenna to let our staff know that you want to be recognized. Staff will keep a speaker's queue and let the chair know who to recognize next. We will do our best to recognize everyone in order. To kick off this discussion, I'm going to call on Donna Brazil for comments. Donna?
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair, and once again, it's good to see all of you. I started my political campaign, as I mentioned earlier, at the age of 9, but I had the opportunity in 1976 to serve as the youth coordinator for Jimmy Carter down in my beloved hometown of New Orleans in the parish I grew up, Jefferson. In 1980, I was a statewide student coordinator at LSU, and it was really, really wonderful to be a part of that as well. I proudly cast my ballot for Jimmy Carter in 1980 when I finally reached that great age of 18. And by 1984, I was honored to serve on the national staff of Reverend Jesse Jackson. During that campaign, that historic campaign, we were able to register millions of new American voters. We gave folks at the grassroots level the opportunity to not only become part of the political process, but to take on prominent roles within the Democratic Party. As a result of Jesse Jackson's campaign, not only in 1984, but also in 1988, I think this country has made tremendous progress in terms of diversifying not just state offices across the country, local county offices, but also the United States Congress. One of the focus and one of the goals that Reverend Jackson had, and of course there are many others on this committee who served also with Reverend Jesse Jackson, but one of his goals was to build a rainbow coalition, to bring people who have been previously excluded into the room where the decisions were being made, and into the room where they could have their voices and their views heard. That was a very important component. And so I was proud back, I believe, when Alexis Herman, former Labor Secretary Alexis Herman, and David Price, who hails from the state of North Carolina, I believe he's announced his retirement, Congressman Dave Price, convened a commission that looked at our calendar, our primary calendar. And one of the goals that came out of that process was to begin to bring in states into what we call before the window, pre-window, that would help us choose the best possible nominee. We were pleased to add South Carolina and Nevada to that lineup. And I think over the last several cycles, we've seen the importance of diversity. It is our strength as a party, it's our strength as a nation. And remember, affirmative action, which you will see in these rules, affirmative action is not about exclusion, it's about inclusion. It's about bringing everybody to the room, having every voice. We've never said, get out the room. We've said, open this door and put that chair next to me so that we can have the very best in our process, in our selection process. It's very important that our primary calendar reflect those values, reflect this vision that we've had as Democrats. We've made so much progress over the years in adding these two states. And Mr. Chair, I would be remiss if I didn't say that in addition to, having so many winter clothes that will allow me to be in this blizzard in New York, a Southern woman. Thank you, Iowa, New Hampshire, but also thank you, South Carolina and Nevada, for giving us the kind of quality nominees that we've seen over the years, and for allowing this diversity to continue to define not just the party, but also to uplift the value that we all believe in as American citizens. So with that, I'll turn back the balance of my time and shut up.
Thank you, Donna. It's great to have your perspective. We really appreciate it. I see that Ken Martin has raised his hand, and I want to remind anyone who would like to ask a question to use the raise hand feature. But Ken, do you have something?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to provide some further context about the 2020 reforms that moved through and were passed for our nominating process. In addition to seeing those reforms successfully lead to greater participation in our process, as many of you know, there was a resolution actually that passed at the Rules Committee. The only resolution that passed out of the Rules Committee at the National Convention and then passed at the National Convention itself was a resolution that I, along with three other chairs, were happy to originate. Chair Trav Robertson from South Carolina, Jane Klebb from Nebraska, Chairwoman Podladowski from Washington, and of course, authored by Yvette Lewis from Maryland, which encouraged the DNC to continue all the reforms that were passed that led to one of the most participatory nominating processes we've seen. And I just want to put that into context because the 2020 National Convention is on the record unanimously supporting those reforms continuing into this next nominating cycle. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. That's an important contribution. Mo Alisi, did you have a question?
Hey, sorry, thanks. Less of a question, more of just kind of building off of some of the things that Donna was just talking about in terms of the calendar. And Mignon said this earlier, right? Our rules reflect our values as a party. And our nominating process is an expression of that. I think what the Unity Commission did went a long way in helping to communicate the values and demonstrate the values of our party. And we've got another opportunity this time to further do so. When I think about our calendar, and when I think about everything that this committee will be doing, there are a couple of values that I think come into play. We've talked about transparency. We've talked about inclusion and expansion, bringing more voices into the process. And let's be honest, we also talk about winning elections. That's what the DNC helps our candidates do, win elections. It seems to me that there are three things that I hope we talk about in the work ahead. We've talked about caucuses already versus primaries. And I think, and I should say, when I think about the calendar and I think about primarily the early window, these are three things that I think are in my mind that guide how I think about this. Number one, the whole construct of primaries versus caucuses. I think it is, while there are some benefits to caucuses, I think it is hard to argue that primaries don't bring more voices into the process. And I think that is a key value of the Democratic Party. Number two, when we're talking about bringing more voices into the process, I think it is important that we have more states involved that bring voices into the process that reflect the diversity and the rainbow that is the Democratic Party. South Carolina and Nevada were important steps, but I think there is more that can be done there to bring more in. And then third and finally, and maybe this is the old comms hat of mine, I think it is, we want more voters to hear the Democratic message earlier in the process. I think it is important that we communicate the Democratic message in as many battleground states as possible earlier in the process. And when our candidates are spending an inordinate amount of time in the first few states, we need to make sure that those states are going to be communicating, we're going to be communicating to voters that are also going to be hearing and need to hear our message in the general election. So as I think about those three priorities, having primary states in the early window, having more diversity in the early window, and communicating as much to as many general election battleground state voters in the early window, I think that there's some room here for us to really communicate some values and for us to make some changes that will reflect moving forward our commitment to bringing more voices in. My opinion, and I'm sure we're going to be talking about this more, 3 of the 4 current early window states satisfy at least 2 of those criteria. 1 does not satisfy any of them, at least in recent years. And so I am hopeful that as this committee continues the work, we open up a very real discussion about whether or not there needs to be some changes to the ordering, and whether or not there needs to be some changes to the composition of the states that are in the early window. And again, not to penalize any one particular state, but to have a calendar that reflects the priorities and the values and brings more voices into the conversation, that gets our message out in front of more voters that are not only going to help us select our nominee, but help us elect the next president. Thank you.
Thank you, Mo. And now I see Luis Heredia has his hands up.
Mr. Chair and Madam Chairwoman, there is also another point that I want to bring up is that there are the permanent members of the DNC have to also be adhered to the same diversity goals, the same changing of our electoral process at times that I feel that we spend a lot of, and for the right reasons, the National Convention is the highest body of our organization, but we need to start focusing that the rules of electing permanent members to the DNC, it's a foregone conclusion now because you all, and those who are elected by the states to represent to the DNC have already gone through the process. But I want to advocate, and will continue to advocate in this body, that the permanent members of the DNC that are elected in our states need to be adhering to the same diversity goals, the same transparencies when the call to the elections of our state committee chairs and our DNC members are made. It is extremely important that we do not only talk on one end about our delegate selection and our delegates to the convention, but we adhere to the same goals of electing a diverse body to this DNC body as members of the permanent DNC committee. It is extremely important we look at these rules and the transparencies. Having spent 2 years in the credentials committee, our rules about the permanent meetings, our permanent members are all over the place here. And so we need to start adhering to those rules and looking at state by state election procedures of electing these permanent members to live to the spirit of the reforms that had been taking place and evolving. But we spend a lot of time on the delegates and don't apply the same rules to our own members of this body. So I will be continuing to focus this in this committee, but I want to highlight it right now because it will be a part of those who will be elected to the 2028 bodies, for example, but they are elected within the rules that we establish now.
So Luis, when you say permanent members, are you referring to the state elected members as opposed to, let's say, the at-large members?
Correct. So I'm talking about the 200 apportioned DNC members that are elected, and many of them will be elected in 2024. I'm talking about the rules when we elect state parties chairs and vice chairs, that the spirit of the reforms that have been taking place are also being applied to those elected members.
Okay, thank you, Luis. I'll call on David McDonald for a question.
It's not actually a question, Jim, but I did want to return to one of the differences that remain between caucuses and primaries that I think is important to this discussion. A big benefit of a caucus is that if your candidate does not make the 15% threshold, you can change your vote to a candidate that does. You can influence the process going forward. The issues that brought you to the precinct caucus do not get lost, don't get washed out of the system. You have a continued reason to participate. The 15% threshold, there's a reason why we have it, but it also causes us to push a lot of people out of the system. That's one advantage to the caucus system. We do not have that advantage in the public primary system. And I think we need to take a serious look at creating a validated mechanism that states that choose to can adopt using some form of ranked choice voting to redistribute votes of those people who voted for candidates who do not make the threshold, so that we don't tell them that our interest in them is gone the minute their candidate loses. We are a party that is about issues, not just candidates. And when we build a coalition behind a candidate, it needs to reflect a mandate that goes across a broad spectrum. So I hope we will take a serious look at that. I know last cycle we gave some guidelines. We more or less said it's not explicitly prohibited, but we did not give any guidelines about how it should be done consistently and fairly. And part of the confusion that goes on around something like ranked choice voting can be the fact that the internet makes everybody assume that the rules are all the same, but you get advice from 57 jurisdictions about how it works. I had some experience with that in the last cycle working in other states, and I'm sure others have had it, but not an easy question, but I think it's one we need to address this cycle.
Thank you, David. The next hand I see is Yvette Lewis.
Thank you so much, Mr. Co-Chairman. I just want to sort of reflect a little bit, add to what Donna said a bit, but think about where we are now as opposed to where we were in 2016 and 2020. The work of the Unity Reform Commission, of which I was a part, was excellent work. It was work, though, that was reflective of the times that we were in. As we talk about the calendar or any other changes that we might consider moving forward, I think in this present time, with what is happening on the other side, any hint of suppression or exclusion, whether intentional or incidental, we need to look at and make sure that we are not guilty of the same things that we are accusing the other side of. I think it's important for us to always be transparent and open, but I think it's more important for us to make sure that our members, the members that we represent, the states that we represent, where we have our constituents, they are all a part of the process, whether that's out in the states or on the DNC, period. But I really think that anytime the trajectory of the race changes so significantly, by the time you get to South Carolina, it means we need to look at what's happening. I think that we just need to look at the last election cycle, the total trajectory of the race change, where people that look like me were able to be a part of the process. And I just think that we need to be mindful of that as we have this discussion, to make sure that those people that we say are the most important part of our party, we really treat them like they're the most important part of our party, and we let them speak as if they're the most important part of our party. That's it.
Thanks very much, Yvette. Next hand I see is Molly Mcgarrett.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chairman, and want to echo and completely agree with the comments that were just made by Chairwoman Lewis. I think the other piece that we have to remember is obviously there's a lot of nostalgia, and there's a lot of this is how we do things. This is, caucuses and some of these other issues and these traditions have been an important fabric of our party. But at the same time, the social norms are switching around what people feel comfortable going to. A caucus is incredibly intimidating to people. And frankly, some of how even state parties run are incredibly intimidating to somebody who has not grown up in this type of environment, who doesn't know people who have participated before. And so I think we have to consistently put ourselves in the shoes of people who are on the outside of this process and think about, what does the process say to them about how welcome they are? And if there's, pages and pages of rules, and go to someone's house or go meet with a bunch of strangers in a gym, especially during a pandemic, I think that is something that will continue to serve as a barrier. We see, I hear from my mom all the time, I don't want you to text me. I want you to call me on the phone. I want you to come to my house. I mean, it's just, things are just shifting. Communications are shifting. People's ability to devote time. People work non-traditional schedules. There's just a lot that is shifting in our country right now. And our party has to keep up with those changes if we want to continue to welcome everybody at the table and say their voices matter. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you for that, Molly. Artie Blanco, I think, is next.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. We here in Nevada have prided ourselves on not only being part of that early window, thanks to our great giant leader, Senator Harry Reid. And he really brought what we needed in this state, not only as a state that is very diverse, not only in people of color, but also in trade with lots of labor representation and density. This is the working class that we need to continue to speak to if we want to continue to win elections as Democrats. Not only that, we've prided ourselves on opening the voting process here in Nevada. Many folks may not know, especially our new members here to the Rules and Bylaws Committee, that Nevada has now officially moved from a caucus to a state-run primary. We are looking forward to opening that voting process, not only with automatic voter registration, same day voter registration, but we are also stepping up to the challenge to mailing mail ballots, automatic mail ballots to every registered voter in the state of Nevada for our elections. Something positive that the COVID situation gave us, I think in 2020, is opening the access to the ballot for all voters, even voters that have multiple jobs and family members to look after. So we really pride ourselves on that. We look forward to the discussions that will continue. And if any members have questions or want to come out to visit us in Nevada, in Las Vegas or in Reno, or even in Elko, we'll be there to meet you. Thanks.
Thank you, Artie. And then I believe Dennis Spade has his hand raised.
I had pulled it down, but all I want to say is I want to underscore what Mo said about the diversity and the schedule, and quite frankly, the democracy that primaries bring. I'll just lay it out there. I'm fully in support of the final few states worth of caucuses being moved to primaries. If we can work that out, obviously we have state legislatures to work through to get some of that stuff done. And I'm also about making sure that those that go first reflect the Democratic voting population. And I think the years past when we moved Carolina and Nevada forward, that was the right thing to do. And the question is whether or not we should move any others or try to consolidate on a particular day for maybe a first primary day in front of the Super Tuesday.
Thanks, Dennis. Frank Leone.
Thank you. In addition to diversity, as we've talked about, I think transparency needs to be a very important part of our process. And part of that is also simplicity. In terms of transparency, in recent years, we've done a better job of putting proposed materials and policies and guidelines and calendars and timetables out there for people that were accessible on our website. And I think that's something we really need to focus on. And frankly, not only for delegate selection, but for the DNC as well. I mean, I think there are a lot of people, including maybe DNC members, who really don't understand how the DNC works. And I think we need to do a better job of that. The other issue, and it relates to it because I can't think of a rules change that would reduce transparency and increase complexity more than ranked choice voting. It just seems to me with proportional representation, where everybody whose candidate gets over 15% has a chance at a delegate is a good system. It's different from the Republican system. It's not winner take all. Taking that less than 15% and carving it every which way, it seems to me does not achieve a goal. Last year, ranked choice voting came up after we had adopted our delegate selection rules. And I guess I agree with David that it's something we do need to address. I just have a totally different view of how we should address it. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Frank. And as new members are discovering, a wide range of views is what this committee is about. Now, and to further set that context, I'd like to call on one of our longtime members, but also a real academic expert on what we do, Elaine Kmark. Elaine, can you give us a little more background?
Sure, Jim, and hello to everybody. I look forward to working with you. Ever since the new nomination rules came into effect, which were between 1968 and 1976, the world changed. It's one of those examples of unintended consequences. No one back in the McGovern-Fraser Commission in 1972 said to themselves, we're going to make Iowa and New Hampshire so all important to the nomination process that they winnow the field and sometimes wipe out the field for everybody else. And yet, in 1976, when Jimmy Carter won the Iowa caucuses and kind of came out of nowhere, all of a sudden, people turned their attention to the fact that the new nomination system, one dominated by primaries, not caucuses, was in fact a sequential system. And once you have a sequence of elections, being first is really, really important. Now, the New Hampshire primary has been first since the 1920s, and yet it never had the power that it has had in the recent decades. And the Iowa caucuses were always early on they too never had the same power they did until we turned to this new system, which really comes into effect in 1972 and 1976. So it's not surprising that this committee has, and other commissions have, since 1976, have been talking about and arguing about and trying to figure out this question of who begins the nominating process. How does it start? As has been mentioned by Leah and others, in 2004, Jesse Jackson began to introduce the issue of diversity into the early systems. And actually, a guy named Ron Walters, a fellow political scientist like myself, made an argument to the commission that year about looking at this as a civil rights issue, that these two states that were largely white were having this huge impact on the rest of the system. So in 2005, the DNC, at that point a commission, the DNC decided to add 2 states to the early sequence of primaries and caucuses. And they decided to do it in a way that I remember and I think was a very good way consistent with our values, which is anybody could apply. There were a series of open hearings that were held before the Rules and Bylaws Committee, and there were really 2 criteria that we were looking at. One was geographic diversity. We obviously needed a southern state and a western state if Iowa and New Hampshire were going to be in that mix. And the other was, would they be small states so that a candidate could do some retail politicking in the state instead of just, going to a TV station and doing all your politics from there. And then the third thing is, would they represent an important demographic that was important to the Democratic electorate? And that's how we got South Carolina and Nevada in our lineup of the early states. So as we think about this, I think we need to think about what are we going to do with these early states? There's nothing written in stone. Every 4 years, the party sets the calendar. One of the things that has been done successfully, and I think Jim Roosevelt is the only human being I know who's actually had a successful outcome with the Republican Party in recent years, which is Jim actually managed to negotiate with the Republicans over this period of time the same early calendar. And that's important because obviously if you're in South Carolina and the Republicans are having a rip-roaring nomination contest and bringing in all sorts of new people and excitement, and the Democrats are just sitting there having to do this 3 weeks later, it kind of has a differential impact on your parties in the states. So we have, since basically 2008, had a fairly stable system, but it is not written in stone. We have changed this system. We've made, there have been different arguments and different criterion coming into effect. And I think that as we discuss this in our subsequent meetings, we ought to start thinking the beginning is important, right? The early states are important. Not because of their numbers, because all of these states have traditionally been small states, but they're important because of the impact they have on subsequent electorates and the role they have played in winnowing out the field. And therefore, I think we ought to think about that as we go forward. And I think this will be a topic of rich discussion, and we can start from scratch.
Thanks very much, Elaine. That's very, very useful. Wait, am I muted?
No.
Oh, no. Okay. Very useful background for us all about the evolution of this process that we are inheriting, but we're dealing with, and we have the opportunity to make reconsiderations and changes. For our final question, I see that Bishop Daughtry has raised her hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to piggyback on something that my colleague Frank Leon said about access to our materials and ensuring we have the broadest possible access. And I'm going to advocate for something you wouldn't think a Brooklyn girl would advocate for, and that's ensuring that our voters in rural America are thought about when we talk about access. Many do not have access to the internet, although we hope that the infrastructure legislation will help them. But when you consider that 40% of rural America are people of color, being able to reach to them, connect with them, communicate with them, and engage them in our nominating process is critically important for the growth and the stability of our party. And so as I would like us to, in some way, encourage state parties to not solely rely on the internet as they are reaching to the electorate and to voters and to potential voters, but for the growth and the future of our party to find alternate mechanisms and means to reach to those who live in rural and small town America. And that is my Brooklyn girl speech about all that I've learned about rural America in the last few years.
And there are a couple rural blocks in Brooklyn, right?
A half a block, Jim, half a block.
Right, okay. Thank you very much, Leah. And now after this excellent discussion, I'm going to turn it back to Lorraine.
Hi, you got it, great, okay. You know, guys, I always enjoy our discussions, and this has been excellent and thoughtful discussion about some key areas where we will probably spend a whole lot more time as we draft the 2024 rules and the calls. And I appreciate, even though this is probably my second cycle, it's a good reminder, a good refresher for people who've been around a minute or two to understand what we're doing. So based on the robust conversation today, there are some areas that may require substantial discussion to determine how we want to proceed. For example, it appears we will need to take time to look at the rules pertaining to our calendar. Right now, we have asked Secretary Ray to schedule 2 times for the Rules and Bylaws Committee to meet during the March DNC meetings. As I mentioned in our orientation for our new members, we don't meet just to meet, we meet to get our business done. And sometimes it may take more than 1 or 2 meetings because one of the things is you see today, we like to hear everybody's opinion and everybody to get involved in the discussion. So that does take some time. So with the understanding that the proposed rules and call need to be finalized in time to be sent to the DNC members 30 days before the summer meeting, which is often held in August, we need to plan to have everything wrapped up by July. As a reference, for the 2020 rules and call, this committee held meetings in January, in March, May, June, and July, and the documents were adopted by the DNC in August. While we will get a better sense in March of what our schedule this year will look like, our initial impression is that we should tentatively plan to meet each month from March until the DNC meeting in August in order to work through all the discussions and the decisions about the rules. Our intention will be for those meetings to be held in person rather than virtually, simply because, as we all know, it's just better and easier to have substantial or substantive discussions in person. With that said, we would like to hear your thoughts or questions that you may have about the next steps in our meeting schedule. And feel free, if you got a thought, if you want to, whatever, if you got something in the back of your mind you want to bring up, don't hesitate to do it. So please use the raise hand feature or send a chat message to Jenna so the staff can let us know to recognize you. So we want to kind of do this for about 10 minutes. If you have any thoughts or questions about the next steps in our meeting schedule, please raise your hand and let's discuss it.
Madam Co-Chair, Joanne Dowdle has been asked to recognize and speak.
I'm sorry, you were breaking up. I couldn't quite hear you.
Joanne has asked to speak.
Oh, great. Joanne, go ahead.
Hi, my only question is about the schedule going forward. If we meet every month and we do it in person, does the committee meet in different parts of the country, or how does that happen?
Well, we've been generally meeting in Washington, but we can move to New Jersey or DC. No, it just depends. Let me ask Secretary Ray.
Yeah,
Mr.
Madam.
Secretary, what you want to comment on that?
I don't think, yeah, Madam Co-Chair, thank you. I don't think any decisions were made. I think historically the committee, when we have not met, or when we have met, has been meeting in DC. Again, that all depends on space and availability of meeting locations and cost and things associated with that. We've often also met, in conjunction with the DNC's executive committee, perhaps during their summer meeting. That might take place, if that were a May, June, they might go somewhere else across the country. But for sure, we'll be in DC in March for that meeting. And I saw the comment from Bishop Daughtry. The Office of the Secretary of Staff is working very closely with the Party Affairs staff right now in determining that schedule right now to get dates out as soon as possible. I know that's a commitment and a priority that I have and something that we're working on diligently right now. And, appreciate everyone's patience as well with that as we continue to try to do it in a way as we navigate COVID and the health concerns of members and putting public safety, health in center. So we appreciate the patience as we continue to navigate and get these dates and locations set.
Joanne, I've been pushing for the Bahamas for years, but nobody seems to want to go there but me. But that's okay.
No.
Who else?
Madam
Tony.
Co-Chair. Sorry,
Yes.
step in, Madam Co-Chair. Ms. Fowler has asked to be recognized to speak.
Fowler, great. Go, Carol. Unmute. Oh, there you are.
Sorry, technology is not my thing. Your question about your remark about the Bahamas reminds me, I really do think that we met in the Virgin Islands one time. I can't think of another reason I would have gone to the Virgin Islands, but that aside, if it certainly would be wonderful, particularly with all these meetings in the summer, if we could set a schedule way ahead, rather than do it a month at the time. If we could say, don't make your family vacation plans for this particular week in June or this particular week in July. So for a lot of us, I think we schedule vacation time with children and grandchildren way ahead of time. So if we could the sooner we can, and I think the secretary is laughing when I'm saying this because I'm always calling him begging for information about when we're going to meet or when the DNC is going to meet. But if we could, the farther ahead we could know this, and even if you set all the meetings tomorrow, that would be great for me, and then figure out at the end whether you're going to Zoom or be in person. That just would be so helpful to us.
Gotcha.
Madam Co-Chair, Ms. Weingarten has asked to be recognized to speak.
Great. Hi, Randy.
Hey, Lorraine. So I think that this has been an amazing meeting in the way in which a lot of people have been kind of briefed and updated about the changes in the rules and why. And most people in America, and frankly, most Democrats, have no idea why these things have happened and when. And our work in the next few months, most of us who are on this committee are very, we're very focused on the workmanlike work. But I was struck today by the comments of some of the new members about how to also use the committee's work as part of a communication strategy of who we are and why we do what we do, and why these rules, the rule of law in creating a fair, unbiased, real process in the Democratic Party, why that's so important. So based upon that, I would just actually say, let's think about not just the workmanlike needs that we need to do as the Rules and Bylaws Committee, but how that centers, how that gets centered in the whole, in the bigger push that Democrats need to do. So consequently, earlier notice of meetings and being around the country and having some ways of engaging people in this work, particularly, and I'm going to just end with the bishop's point, in rural and suburban areas.
Great suggestion. Okay, who's next?
Madam Co-Chair, Mr. Burgos has asked to be recognized.
Tony, come on in.
Madam Co-Chair, Mr. Burgos was my father, so let's just say Tony. I want to add to the discussion. I want to quote the former chair of the DNC, Donna Brazil, in our executive committee meeting in Providence, Rhode Island in 2019, where she said very eloquently, "We fight for the right to vote all of our lives, and we should amplify that as a party to increase democracy. We are in a challenge to democracy like never before." So internally, you are absolutely right. We have to increase democracy by increasing diversity of our party. So to the points that have been made, I wanted to add that. And Madam Co-Chair, I love the Bahamas, but it's not part of the Eastern Caucus. And as an officer of the Eastern Caucus, I would say I would be delighted to host all of you in the great city of Jersey City, facing that smaller part, that small suburban site known as New York City. And then, we have a history of going to the Virgin Islands. In '84, we were in the Virgin Islands, and in '88, we were in the Virgin Islands, in '92, and in Puerto Rico not too long ago. So we can do Puerto Rico, we can do the Virgin Islands, but there's a better island here called Jersey City.
Touche, Tony. I stand corrected. Okay, Jenna, who's next?
Madam Co-Chair, Ms. Donna Brazil has asked to be recognized.
DB.
Thank you, first of all, Tony, for reminding me what I said back in 2019. I've been through 6 cycles. I know that's less than Elaine and probably greater than many. But one thing that has helped me over the years is that the DNC Party Affairs staff and others have provided so much background, so much material. And while I understand there was an orientation session for some of the new members, and welcome, please commit yourselves, staff, and I'm not trying to give you more work. You got a lot of work to do, especially in this election year. But I'm looking at my materials from 2020, the 2020 cycle. I have materials here from the 2016. I got all my materials. I never tossed them. Don't ask me why I didn't shred them. But the data and analytics team provided us with some clear guidance. The technology staff also in 2020 provided us with some good guidance. Of course, our voting rights staff provided us with guidance throughout the last 4 or 5 cycles. So please, can we make sure that the new members get some of this material just so that they can see the history? Elaine has written an awesome book. I think it's in its 3rd edition, but there are some other materials out there that I also believe will add to the conversations we will have. And again, I want to put an emphasis on this whole thing about election security. And while we're virtual today, while we've been virtual for the last, 2 years with this pandemic, we have to be very cognizant that election security and the security of all our infrastructure is of paramount concern. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Donna. And every member, including the new and returning members, have received all of this 2020 stuff. We made a conscious decision to send the 2020 simply because that was the most recent, and if you can at least grab part of that and understand that, that was a basis for our, and then everybody will receive Elaine's book. We made a very conscious decision that she's not only because she's a member of our committee, she's done a great piece of work that is usable for us, for all of us to understand. Okay.
Thank you so much. And I just want to echo something that Tony also said. Wow, there is beautiful weather in all parts of the United States and of course the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. Let me just tell you, New Orleans is perhaps the best. And I welcome you all if you come to my hometown. I'll make you gumbo. Thank you.
Great. Jenna, who else do we have?
Madam Co-Chair, I do not see any other raised hands at this time.
Okay. If there are no further suggestions or query, clearly you want us to get the schedule early. We want to include communications, diversity in what we do. So we've got a tall order to fill. Okay. We will begin working with the staff and we'll get the schedule set for our upcoming meetings, and we'll try to get it out to you just as soon as we can figure it out. Jim, will you wrap us up?
I will. And before we wrap up, I want to wish a happy birthday to Tonio, a birthday he shares with my grandfather. And it's tomorrow. So happy birthday, Tonio, our great host. And members, that concludes our agenda for today's meeting. We appreciate everybody's attendance, and we hope that you found it informative as we begin the important work that's ahead of us. We look forward to seeing you all at our meetings, plural, in March, where we will continue our discussions about the rules in more detail. Before we go, are there any final questions? I think we have answered them all, although Tonio, I see your hand, but I hope it's just saying happy birthday. Anyone else with a question? Okay, seeing no further questions, we want to thank everybody again. We also want to thank our staff and the production team, as Lorraine has said, as well as our court reporter and the sign language interpreters who appeared on the live stream broadcast. We've completed our business today. As such, without objection, the meeting is adjourned.
Bye.